Hello there, you're watching India Global on NDTV. I'm Maha Siddiqui. Over the next half an hour, we'll get you the big international stories of the week. We'll get you facts, ground reports and analyze why these developments are important from India's perspective. Let's hit the start button with the headlines. India pulls out around 2,000 Indians to safety from Sudan. Ceasefire extended by 2 more days. However, fighting between Sudan's military and the rapid support forces continue. India tackles its difficult neighbours on SCO platform sidelines. Rajnath Singh tells his Chinese counterpart that China has eroded the very basis of the ties with India with the border friction in eastern Ladakh. S. Jaishankar unlikely to hold structured meeting with his Pakistani counterpart Bilawal Bhutto Zardari in Goa. But China tries to push itself as a potential peacemaker between Ukraine and Russia, holds a long call with Volodymyr Zelensky that was with Xi Jinping. This even as many Western nations continue to expect India to use its influence with Russia to broker peace. While countries are rushing to evacuate their citizens from Sudan as the fighting between the army and the paramilitary RSF continues unabated for the first 10 days. A fragile ceasefire held for 3 days where most, including India, put all their resources at hand to quickly extricate their people. So far, around 2,000 people have been brought to safety and relief was writ large on their faces as the evacuees reached India. But India has always ensured it stands by its people in such times of crisis, going all the way back to 1990 when it carried out one of the trickiest and most exemplary evacuation from Kuwait during the Gulf War.
After 10 days of witnessing the horrors of armed fighting on the streets of Sudan, to a sense of hope, boarding either an Indian ship or aircraft for evacuation, to finally a sense of relief as they touched down in India.
There was no electricity, water for 4-5 days, and now we feel more safer. Even when we entered, they asked us what you want to eat. In last 10 days, no one was there to take care of us.
बहुत डेंजर सिचुएशन कहने के जाओ तो हम मौत के मुंह से हम रिटर्न आए
मतलब हम लोगों का सब कुछ ले लिया लूट लिया हम लोग पैदल आए बच्चों को एकदम पैदल दौड़ा के लेके आए बच्चे लोग सभी डरे हुए थे
रोड तो बंद था खाना के लिए तो नहीं मिल रहा था
हमारे विदेश मंत्री ने हमको इतना यहाँ तक के लाए और हम अच्छे से आ गए हैं इसके लिए थैंक यू बोलना चाहते हैं
प्रधानमंत्री जी के कावेरी मिशन के नेतृत्व में हमें काफी सपोर्ट मिला और हम यहाँ तक सेफली पहुँच पाए हैं
Around 2,000 Indians stranded in Sudan have been moved to safer zones and over 1,000 back home in India. A 3-day ceasefire facilitating swifter movement via land, which was the biggest challenge initially as active fighting continued. 3,400 Indians had registered with the embassy in Khartoum. On Tuesday, warship INS Sumedha ferried the first batch of 278 Indians from Port Sudan to Jeddah. 256 more were transported by the C-130J aircraft. Another warship, INS Tech, ferried 297 Indians from Port Sudan to Jeddah. And the C-130J aircraft airlifted 264 more in 2 sorties. A Saudia flight brought back 360 Indians on Wednesday night. Another 246 were flown to Maharashtra in a C-17 Globemaster heavy lift aircraft of the Indian Air Force. Jeddah in Saudi Arabia has been used as a transit, and amidst the process of evacuation, the relationship India has nurtured with the Gulf region over the past several years was visible in the time of crisis.
Look, we have been working very closely with the government of Saudi Arabia, the leadership of Saudi Arabia, and they have been extremely helpful, supportive and cooperative in this endeavor, and we are extremely grateful to them for that.
Operation Kaveri is bringing back Indian citizens from strife-torn Sudan, but India has always ensured that it puts in its best effort to evacuate its citizens safely from wherever in the world they may be. One of the most massive efforts goes back 3 decades when India airlifted its nationals from Kuwait at the height of the Gulf War. 170,000 Indians were brought back in a joint effort by Indian Air Force and Air India. Operation Amnesty Airlift. The mission was carried out in September 1996 to bring back the Indian nationals who did not have valid permits from the United Arab Emirates. Operation Rahat. Hundreds of Indians and other nationals were rescued under this operation during the unrest at Yemen's capital Sana'a after the complete takeover by Houthi rebel fighters in January 2015. Following political turmoil in Egypt in March 2011, the Indian government operated special flights to evacuate over 10,000 citizens stranded in Cairo. Operation Maitri. The government of India carried out this mission to safely bring the nationals from Nepal after the deadly earthquake in 2015. Wuhan Airlift. In one of the most difficult evacuation flights, India airlifted its citizens safe from China's coronavirus-hit city, Wuhan, in January 2020. Vande Bharat Mission. Special flights were operated across the globe in this mission to bring back the nationals who were left stranded in foreign countries due to coronavirus pandemic. Operation Devi Shakti. An evacuation operation by the Indian Armed Forces was kicked off in August 2021 to safely bring back Indian nationals from Afghanistan after the collapse of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the fall of Kabul, the capital city of the Taliban. And the most recent in 2021 to facilitate the movement of Indians, mostly students, from war-torn Ukraine. India coordinated successfully with neighboring countries Poland, Romania, Hungary and Slovakia to get transit and flights going for students fleeing Ukraine. And that's not all. On many of these occasions, India has also helped citizens of other countries too.
And joining us now on the show is MOS MEA V. Muralidharan, who is coordinating the evacuation efforts from Jeddah. Many thanks, sir, for speaking with NDTV. The first question I want to ask you is the challenges being faced at this point during evacuation, because active fighting was on for the first 10 days when the land movement of the evacuees had started already. What were the big challenges that were being faced and continue to be faced?
See, the situation in Sudan was, in fact, very volatile. It's complex. And in the capital of Sudan, Khartoum, there was fights going on. So, first of all, our effort was there to bring all the Indians who are in the conflict zones to a comparatively safe zone within Khartoum or in the nearby Khartoum. And from there, the air travel was not possible from there. You may remember that the Saudi Airlines, which was there about to take off from the Khartoum airport, it got damaged during the fight. So we had to resort to another option, which was Port Sudan, around 800 kilometers, made a travel of on the roads, even more than that. So getting buses for and ensuring the safety of all those who were traveling, that itself was a very big task. And fortunately, our embassy has been able to do that. As of now, almost close to in Jeddah, from Port Sudan to Jeddah, of course, it was Indian Air Force as well as Indian Navy who brought all these people from Port Sudan to Jeddah.
So I specifically want to ask you about how risky the land movement has been within Sudan. What are those who have been evacuated been telling you, because you've been personally interacting with them?
No, many of them told me that they have come out from the mouth of death and reached the safe centers in Port Sudan, and then from there to Jeddah. Of course, the travel in the initial days, because you remember that the first travel that was undertaken, it was even before the ceasefire was announced. So, and even during the ceasefire also, there were sporadic incidents in many parts. So, it was a sort of a, I can say that through these risks, the Indian embassy chose to take our people from Khartoum to Port Sudan.
So I understand India was talking both to the army as well as the RSF for a safe passage. Many other countries have also been in contact trying to do the same. Was there any sort of support coming from that end? Did it come from that end?
See, I don't want to divulge the details of how it was ensured. But of course, I can definitely tell you that India has a very strong development partnership with Sudan. So both the parties or everyone who is there, all the players in Sudan, with them we have keep good in touch with them.
Final question, sir. I want you to, explain to us the kind of support that Saudi Arabia has extended, ground support for this evacuation.
Of course, Saudi Arabia has been extremely helpful, coordinating with us. Our control room is functioning from Jeddah. Our embassy and the consulate in Jeddah, and also we pulled officers from the region, various missions and all, and a control room was set up in Jeddah. Our Indian Air Force planes have been parked in the King Abdullah Air Base in Jeddah, and from there it has been operating for the last 4 days. Of course, the Saudi authorities have been very well coordinating with us, extremely hospitable, very warm welcome to all those who came in, providing refreshments, providing all the assistance for speedier immigration procedures to be completed. So that way, India's relationship with partnership with Saudi Arabia, the leadership of Saudi Arabia and the government of Saudi Arabia has been coming very much forthcoming in supporting the evacuation of Indians from Sudan to Jeddah and from here to India.
V. Muralidharan, many thanks, sir, for speaking with NDTV. Let's move on now to our other big story, to India making its move to tackle its difficult neighbors on the SCO platform. As the chair of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, India is expected to invite all members for various meetings, which it has. Now comes the tricky question of engaging with them on a one-on-one. So while Rajnath Singh did so with his Chinese counterpart, S. Jaishankar is unlikely to do so with his counterpart, that is Pakistan Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari in Goa. This is pretty much following a pattern by India. While it has continued to engage with China despite the friction in eastern Ladakh, the lines of communication have remained open, but for engagement at the topmost level. While with Pakistan, there hasn't really been much engagement since the Uri terror attack in 2016. Let's now take a look at what Defence Minister Rajnath Singh told his Chinese counterpart and what the response from the other side looked like. First of all, India has said that the Chinese actions in eastern Ladakh have eroded the very basis of ties between the two sides. The Chinese side has said it shares more interests than differences with India. India said existing agreements have been violated by China. China says India-China border situation is generally stable. This is not something India agrees with. LAC disengagement first, then de-escalation next is what Rajnath Singh has said, while the Chinese side said both sides should take a long-term view of the relationship. India has said relation is based on prevalence of peace and tranquility on the border. China says it hopes that the two will work together to enhance mutual trust. So you can clearly see the difference of the stand that both sides have taken. Meanwhile, the message to Pakistan is that there will be no bilateral meeting between the two sides. There will be engagement on the multilateral platform. Though Rajnath Singh, in fact, has in some sense hit out at Pakistan at the SCO platform, saying that if a nation shelters terrorists, it only not just only poses a threat to others, but for itself too. In a similar vein, S. Jaishankar pointed out that it's very difficult to engage with a neighbor that promotes terrorism. So sources have told NDTV that a structured bilateral meeting with the Pakistan Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari next week is unlikely. Meanwhile, China is now trying to in fact, emerge as a potential peacemaker in the Ukraine-Russia war. A long-awaited call finally happened between the Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky. The call was described by Zelensky as long and meaningful. In a statement, Zelensky said that particular attention was paid to the ways of possible cooperation to establish a just and sustainable peace for Ukraine. In a readout by Beijing, Xi Jinping is believed to have reiterated Beijing's point that China's core position on the Ukraine conflict is to promote peace and talks. Now the call comes after China, in fact, openly is siding with Russia on the G20 platform, not agreeing to the language of the communique in the finance minister and the foreign ministers meeting in India. Soon after, the French President Emmanuel Macron had travelled to Beijing and he had asked China to knock sense into Russia, indicating Europe's expectation that China should play a bigger role to defuse the crisis. Interestingly, this comes months after similar expectations were made of India, after Prime Minister Modi's Samarkand meeting with President Putin, where he said that this is not an era of war. US and Europe expressed the desire for India to play a greater role. It was most recently stated by the Ukrainian Deputy Foreign Minister Emin Zafarova, who travelled to India. Now, in a significant move, the U.S. Congress's India caucus held a U.S.-India summit on Capitol Hill this week. The meeting was attended by top U.S. lawmakers, government leaders, experts and leaders of the Indian-American community to discuss how to strengthen U.S.-India strategic and economic relationship. NDTV spoke exclusively to Congressman Ro Khanna, who was instrumental in organizing the summit as the co-chair of the India caucus. Listen in. What about issues like immigration, green card, visa issues? Are those on top of the agenda as well?
They are. We actually have a number of people speaking to that. You know, one of the challenges has been people who are on an H-1B visa here. Sometimes they're waiting 10, 15, 20 years before being able to get a green card. That was never the case 2 decades ago. That has to be fixed. I said there shouldn't be country quota caps. And have sponsored that legislation, and we're going to be seeing what progress we can make on that. Also, there's been a backlog, as you know, for tourists visiting or business leaders visiting America, and we have the State Department person overseeing that to address that issue.
One issue in particular that has come up, over the last few years is also that of Indian children who had gone to the U.S. With their work visa holding parents, and now they are beginning to face immigration issues. As you yourself pointed out, the wait for green card is also long there. This puts them in a pretty difficult situation, doesn't it? Are such issues likely to be taken up too?
They are, and they're akin to dreamers in this country. People who've come at 2, 3, 4 years age. They've been here most of their lives, gone to school here, rooting for the sports teams here. And then suddenly they realize that their parents may no longer have legal status, their own status may be jeopardized, or even if they were born here, they're not going to live here without their parents. So it's a very complicated situation, and that's why we need in this country comprehensive immigration reform.
You also said that as co-chair of the caucus, you'd like to take it beyond its original goals. So what exactly are you looking at there?
I'd like to have the Indian American diaspora much more engaged in helping shape the partnership. I've expanded by 25 people already, the India caucus. We have 115 people already joining. I'd like to get more members from both sides in the caucus. And I'd like to look at specific legislation that can strengthen the defense and technology and economic ties.
And what role do you think the Indian diaspora has played over these years in strengthening the ties between the two countries?
Well, it's been an extraordinary economic success story here in the United States, and certainly they have helped deepen the technology ties. India has been a huge market for many companies in the United States, and the Indian American community has been highly regarded as contributing back to America, and that has created a positive impression of Indian Americans and I would argue by extension India in the United States.
Do you think there's more interest in India from the West, especially from the US, as a counter to China, or is it on its own merit and standing?
Well, it's both. I think India is also looking to the United States to make sure that China doesn't emerge as a hegemon. For a long time, they looked to the Soviet Union because the United States was more aligned with Pakistan and China during the Cold War. And India had to look to the Soviet Union in part for protection against China. That has changed, and now India is looking to the United States, and the United States wants to see there being multipolarity in Asia. We don't want to see China emerging as a hegemon.
Final question to you. You've often spoken up for human rights values yourself. You look at incorporating that while being the co-chair of the caucus as well?
Absolutely. I mean, we will speak about the strategic partnership, and the strategic partnership will transcend any particular president, prime minister, party, or even generation. I mean, this is a strategic partnership for 100 years. But we also have to speak about our values, and those values for the United States are democracy, pluralism, the respect for people of all different backgrounds. I believe India has some of those similar values, and when those values are not being upheld, we should speak out, either if they're not being upheld in India or the United States or anywhere around the world.
Rokan Namei, thanks for speaking with NDTV.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's move on now to our special report. As the Palestinian-Israeli conflict continues, India has done a delicate balancing act in its relationship with Palestine while growing its ties with Israel. NDTV's Kadambini Sharma visited the region and reports from the zone that continues to see conflict and recent escalation during Ramzan.
Clashes between the Israeli police and the worshippers at Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem at the beginning of Ramadan. And then rockets rained on Israel not only from Palestinian territory, but after 17 years from Lebanese territory too.
This is a chopper which is taking me to the Lebanon border, Israel-Lebanon border.
The territory of Lebanon is so close that one can see the buildings and the watchtowers with bare eyes. Surprisingly, at the border there is a mushroom packaging company, a wall and some old fencing. Feeling is of being under watch constantly.
Israel is building a wall at the border. This is a very new development. Around 1 month back this has started, but this wall is required as Israel believes to at least slow down terrorists.
The area heavily covered with olive bushes is marked by UN as non-military zone. Civilian houses are clearly visible. But the experts say rockets come from the orchard and the homes. There has been an instance where terrorists entered from this side and planted IED in Tel Aviv, and at least one person was reported to be injured in the blast. Others too have been intercepted. Watchtowers dot the border. The easily traversable distance has heightened the tension. But disappointment with UN not doing enough is also clear. And a former intelligence officer describes the situation.
What's the mission of the UN forces? The mission of the UN forces is to enforce the resolution that was accepted in the UN, to make sure that the area that you're looking at will be empty of any illegal presence, meaning the presence, military presence. The bottom line is that Hezbollah is here, you can see it, with military presence. Sometimes I see them even dressed with uniforms.
NDTV also visited the Iron Dome battery, but videography is strictly prohibited. However, one of the 6 tunnels claimed by Israel to have been dug by Hezbollah in this northern area is allowed to be photographed. Unlike several tunnels discovered in India's Kashmir, Punjab and Rajasthan, this tunnel is spacious, has stairs, and it's said special machines were used to muffle the sounds of digging. Its depth is of 55 meters and was 800 meters long. IDF says the tunnel was equipped with advanced infrastructure for electricity, ventilation and even communication systems, and that the passage would have taken years to complete. But where does this violence stop? Head of Palestinian think tank Khalil Shikaki cites empirical data for the spike in violence and also talks about two-state solution which India supports. PM Modi had visited Palestine in 2018.
There's a third vision, by the way, that we also ask about, which is Hamas's vision for ending the conflict. Hamas's vision is one Arab Muslim state.
Palestinian and Israeli high-tech collaborate, and they have Indian clients too. And high-tech entrepreneur says, view about India and Palestine is very positive.
India in particular has been extremely very positive. And the Indian government does a lot of projects here in Palestine. For example, I don't know if you heard about the Indian tech park.
This is one of the neighborhoods of Ramallah, and as you can see, it looks like any other quiet, calm neighborhood. Even few days back, we had seen how the tensions flared up, and there are daily news reports about attacks on Israelis. So these are the things which are continuously happening.
But all the external threats have not stopped the Israelis from protesting for the democracy they want, week after week. Reserve forces have joined in too.
We are not going to stop until we assure the safety of democracy in Israel.
It's not only veterans and reserve and the army, it's every democratic person in Israel should be joining us to fight for democracy.
With all contradictions and complexities, Israel stands. In Israel and Palestine, Kadambini Sharma for NDTV.
And finally, South Korea has firmly established itself as a cultural exporter with the global popularity of K-soaps, K-pop, entertainment, music, TV, dramas and movies. In a brand ambassador of sorts, the South Korean president was seen singing American Pie at the state dinner at the White House, receiving applause from host Joe Biden.
I let those people dance and very happy for a while.
Well, that's it then this week. See you again next Friday. Bye-bye.